If you've ever thought to yourself, how the heck do people teach their dogs how to alert to blood sugar spikes or teach their dog to alert to fidgeting? Well, if so, you are in luck because today we're going to do a high-level overview of how to build a training plan and then implement a training plan around medical alerts. But this training plan can work for any disability task, but we're going to be using a nose target as our example, but you can follow along and build a training plan alongside this video. You are more than welcome to use any medical alert like a chin rest or a paw target. Like I said, we're gonna do a high-level overview and break it down step by step, so stay tuned. Before we dive in though, just a quick intro for those of you who may not know me. My name is Lisa. I'm a certified professional dog trainer, a Atlas Assistance Dog certified trainer, a Canine Good Citizen evaluator, and a Catch Academy mentor. And I help people self-train their service dog using force-free positive reinforcement methods that are backed by science. If you want more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so that you can be notified whenever I post a new video. You can also hit that like button if you would like to reinforce me and you want me to create more videos. That is one way to influence my behavior, is by giving me a little bit of positive reinforcement. Okay, just so you know how this is gonna go, I'm gonna break down exactly how to build a training plan, as well as show you a few demos of how to implement the training plan. I will be using a Google spreadsheet, but you are more than welcome to use whatever you'd like. Some people prefer to print a training plan or actually write it out with pen and paper. Other people might prefer putting it in a Word doc, or if you're tech savvy, a Notion dashboard. But I personally, for this, like using a Google spreadsheet, and that way I can access it from my phone. It's free. It's straightforward. I do have a Notion dashboard for the big public access training, but for some of these little individual tasks, I'm going to be using a Google spreadsheet so that it's easier also for you guys to follow along. So big picture, this spreadsheet is here to help you decide what you're training so that you're really clear on what exactly you're training, mapping out the steps. You can also use the spreadsheet to track your training sessions and what you've practiced and track progress. Tracking your progress will not only help you kind of see if you are even making progress. If you're not making progress, then it'll allow you to adjust as well, which is why I personally like using a digital version, because it's easier to adjust my plan versus having to cross out things. But like I said, that is my personal preference. Now, this tracker is also going to help you make sure that you don't move too fast in your training, because a lot of times we get excited and we want to move really fast through steps. And this tracker will help you understand how to break it down into smaller steps, because whenever our dogs aren't doing something, it's usually that we need to split our criteria smaller or break it up into smaller pieces so that way our dogs can be successful. If you move too fast, it just leads to frustration for both the dog and the handler, and it causes your dog to want to listen to you less and less because they start to get really frustrated. With that said, let's go ahead and just dive into the spreadsheet. You're welcome to follow along here. So at the top of the sheet, you're going to see some of the setup questions. Put what your disability task is at the very top, which, by the way, I'd love to know what you and your service dog in training are working on currently. So leave a comment below and I might create a video about it. So first question, what is your initial verbal cue going to be? It could be a verbal cue, a hand signal, and this is because you're going to have to teach the behavior on its own first so that you can proof it in different environments and distractions, etc. But I personally like to have it really strong on verbal cue first before I introduce using it as an alert. So in this example, we're going to use the verbal cue boop as our verbal cue for the behavior. So for this nose target, I'm going to teach using target training, using a post-it note as a target. If you're not sure what these training techniques are, these are all things I cover in my course, Training 101, which I go over all of these training concepts, and I'll link to all of my courses below for those who are interested. Next, we want to think about what is going to be the context cue or the scientific term for this is antecedent, meaning what happens right before that's going to cue your dog to do this behavior. And so an antecedent can be anything. It could be you fidgeting. It could be you biting your nails. It could be alerting you to low or high blood sugar. So you're just gonna write what is going to be the behavior that they're alerting you to, or that tells your dog this is when you're going to do this behavior. For this example, our context cue is going to be fidgeting with our hands. So when you start fidgeting, that's going to cue your dog, come over and boop your hand. The next setup question is this a single behavior or does it require chaining? So a nose boop is a single behavior. The dog sees the cue, comes over, boops your hand or your leg. There aren't really extra behaviors strung together, so you're gonna mark that as a single behavior. Now, if you're teaching your dog to fetch your phone, for example, that is multiple different behaviors in one. They have to go to the phone, pick up the phone, return to you, and then drop the phone in your hand, ideally not on the floor. But that is called chaining, and normally we teach that using back chaining. So you start with the last behavior and then work your way back and then string them together. Then finally, we want to think about how are we going to reinforce this in real life without treats. For this one, we're going to use neck massage as our reinforcer. So yes, your dog is still going to learn using a clicker and treats, or a verbal marker and treats, but in real life, sometimes we might not have treats on us, so we want to think about what are those real life reinforcers that we can use. And always remember that reinforcers are up to that individual dog. Not every dog is going to find neck massages reinforcing. So think about what does your dog enjoy. Now remember, when you're filling this out, it's not set in stone. So don't get too hung up. Just know that you can always edit later. Next, we're going to break down behaviors into steps and milestones. So for each task, generally, you are going to outline 3 main milestones. Think of this as like the big phases of each behavior, and then you can break it down into smaller steps underneath. You'll see here, I'm breaking down milestone 1 into smaller pieces so that by the time I'm done with milestone 1, I will have phased out the Post-it note. So here you can see I am teaching that booping the Post-it note gets the reward. I love using a Post-it note because then I can move it around to wherever I want. It's much easier to then transfer it to my leg and eventually phase it out so that he is booping my leg. Good. Next, we want to teach our dogs how to generalize. So first, for those of you who might not know, let's break down what I mean when I say generalization. Dogs are really, really good at reading the context of things. That's why they're so good at knowing when you're going to leave, when they're about to get a bath, etc. But they're not as good at understanding behavior in the way that we see it. So what I mean by that is if they learned a behavior like sit while you're standing in the kitchen, holding a treat in your left hand, luring them into that sit, and then you ask for sit while you're laying down on the couch, not holding a treat, your dog might not understand it because in their head, they're like, oh, I sit when my person takes a treat from the treat bowl, lures me and holds the treat up like this in the kitchen. So when you're laying down and you say sit, they might be like, what do you mean? And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but for the purpose of just simplifying the understanding of generalizing, just know that they may be connecting a specific behavior to a specific context. They're looking at things like your body position, the room, what you're doing with your body, versus we're thinking of, I say the word sit and then you're sitting. Our job is to help our dogs generalize, which just means, hey, sit is what means sit. And it still means sit when I'm standing, when I'm laying down, when I'm watching TV, when we're at the store. So basically we're just showing our dogs, hey, this verbal cue means the same thing, even when the context is a little bit different. For the nose boop alert, you want to practice different body positions like sitting, lying down, leaning on a wall, different distractions, as well as different areas of the house. The more clearly you write out how you're going to generalize, the easier time you're going to have knowing what to work on each day. In other words, you can say, okay, we worked on this in the living room and the kitchen. Now let's work on this while we're outside on a walk. You'll see here that under Generalize, I put one of them as standing since I initially taught it sitting, but I'm breaking down standing even more because I know that that's a big transition. And then I can always add in more lines underneath each one to split criteria even more. So now that I'm standing, you can see that Dodger's a little bit confused, but I just reinforced him. Here's a quick replay of that. So you can see he doesn't even actually make contact with my leg, but I still reinforce him because I want him to know that he's headed in the right direction. We just switched the context on him, so he is going to be confused most likely. Not every dog will be confused, many dogs will. If your dog is a little bit confused, just make sure that you are keeping them motivated. You don't want too many times in a row where your dog is struggling. I'm also helping him out by kind of sticking my leg out and giving him that little bit of hint. So that's something I will need to phase out as well and work towards a more natural stance, meaning that I should be standing more naturally by the end of this. He also brought me the post-it note, which shows that he's kind of getting over this and bored as we were training for too long. So keep your training sessions short. Offering different behaviors is a sign of your dog getting frustrated or bored. Once your dog is really good at the behavior, we are going to use what we call a cue transfer. And so we go over this, like I said, in the Training 101 course, but at a very high level, it is the new cue that you want them to do. So in this case, fidgeting, making sure my dog sees it clearly. I pause, like they should know it, and they're gonna be like, I don't know what you want. Then you say the verbal cue, so boop, then reinforce. I then slowly phase out the verbal cue. So fidget, wait, verbal cue, and then do it until I can completely phase out the verbal cue altogether. So here you can see that I am breaking down and splitting criteria of how I am going to do the cue transfer. So I'm going to introduce the fidgeting, pause, and go back to maybe even sticking out my leg a little bit more just to give him a hint. And then from there, I can slowly start phasing out any sort of hint. Now, as I mentioned earlier, sorry if I sound like a broken record, the reason why I do like the digital version is you can always adjust this as you go, because maybe your dog does pick up on it fast, and so maybe you just work on having him start to notice you fidgeting randomly throughout the day. That's why I like to keep this a living document, because while we do want to plan so we know the trajectory of what we're going to do, we also want to make sure that we are working at our dog's pace, and you can always either split criteria even more, adjust the environment and make it a little bit easier, or skip steps if your dog is doing really well. In this example, I am using pressure as the behavior and crying as the environmental context that I want Deary to respond to. So I'm pretending to cry here, and I say pressure. She's doing displacement sniffing, and she's sniffing around because she's kind of stressed and confused. And I say pressure one more time. She's like completely ignoring me, and then I give her a little bit more of a clue. So the first time you do this, it might feel a little bit messy, but it's okay to then say the cue. You want them to be confused and notice the context so that they're a little bit confused at first. And after practicing a few more times, you can see that I made sure to start crying when she saw me. I said pressure still. She's slowing down a little bit, but she provides it. And then I mark and reinforce that behavior. And so just keep in mind that you're going to keep doing this. It doesn't have to be all in one session. In fact, I recommend you keep your sessions nice and short, but basically you want to keep pairing the old context, which like I said, in this case is crying, with the new behavior until they are fully connecting that new context with pressure. And you see that last time she actually did it without the hint, meaning I didn't have to give her the hint of the old cue, which was the verbal cue pressure. Now, if you're working on, let's say, blood sugar or cortisol, you're going to have to collect samples so that your dog knows how to alert you to those specific odors. And then from there, once your dog is alerting or noticing those odors, you are going to pair with the alert behavior. That is a whole nother topic. Let me know if you want me to create a high-level overview on scent training as well. So next, we're going to track our progress during each session. Notes are really, really important to track your progression and make adjustments as needed. And so I can really brainstorm outside of the training session, how am I going to break this down or split criteria so that my dog can be more successful. Anytime you train, you're going to write your notes. Now, you can always quickly do like a recorded voice note if it's too much work to, get the spreadsheet out right after. I like to do like a quick record into my phone in a notes app, and then I take the transcript and kind of copy and paste that later at the end of each week. And that will guide you on what you need to work on the next day. Ideally, we are using objective language over subjective language, because when it's subjective, sometimes it's hard to know. Like if you say struggled, that's like, okay, well, how much did they struggle? What does that mean, struggle? Did they just ignore you and blow you up completely, or like booping the couch instead of your leg? So you want to be clear on what the dog is actually doing, not just you saying struggled, because otherwise it'll look like the same thing each day when you look back at your notes, like, oh, he struggled every day, but that doesn't really tell us how to improve our training plan or split criteria more. So you want to be as objective as possible. Before you move on to marking a step as complete, you want to make sure your dog is reliable at least 80% of the time. Ideally, pretty much 100%, unless they're just over, trained in that training session and they're over it, but not because they're confused. The last piece that I personally think is very, very important is organizing your training videos so that you can actually review progress if you need to look back on it. And I also think it's really helpful for troubleshooting. It doesn't have to be fancy, just record from your phone and then upload it as unlisted on YouTube, because that way you have unlimited storage. If you store them in Google Drive or Dropbox, you're gonna have to pay for a plan because eventually your videos are going to take up a lot of storage. So I like to do an unlisted YouTube playlist and just copy and paste the link to the entire playlist on my spreadsheet. That way I can quickly refer to it at any time. I also will say at the beginning of every video, so later if I'm confused on what the video is going to be, I'll quickly say, working on generalizing nose boop in different rooms of the house. That way, when I first click play, I know what I'm watching.
I'll show you what this looks like. You can see all these videos are unlisted, and I was practicing counter conditioning to nail trims. And so, I can easily look back and kind of review progress. So if I were to go back to, let's say, I'm gonna go to this one. Oops, I can click on it here to watch. Okay, they gotta resemble with slow treats and dodgers. And so because I said that at the very beginning of the video, it's easier for me to understand, what this video is going to be about.
Now, if you have ADHD like me, sometimes you'd rather just not do any notes at all than do some notes. So what I recommend is at least getting into the habit of doing your notes at the end of each session, getting consistent, because that is truly how you can improve your training. If you get stuck, always zoom out and simplify. How can I make this easier for the dog? Or rewatch your video training session. You'll start to see, is my dog starting to stress pant? Is my dog starting to get antsy? And maybe my training session went too long, or maybe I'm not splitting criteria enough and I went too fast, too soon, and progressed too much in one session. Also, give yourself positive reinforcement as well. So every time you check off something as done in the tracker, that is a win. Okay, so that's it for today, everyone. Now, if you want my exact template for nose boop alerts, a kisses alert, and a paw target alert, these are included in my medical alerts training course, which I will link to below. If you want to learn all about how to self-train your service dog using positive reinforcement and science-backed methods, be sure to check out my free webinar, which I've linked to below. That's going to cover everything from start to finish of how you can train your dog from being your pet all the way to being trained as a service dog. Now, if you want videos on any other topics, be sure to leave a comment below. Like I said, I can do a high-level overview of scent work as well, if that's something you are all interested in. All right, that's it for today, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.